Charlotte Blake sat quietly in the soft glow of the living room, her hands resting gently on her rounded belly. The 8 months of pregnancy had already left her exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but tonight a deeper weariness settled over her heart. Her husband, Victor Langford, seemed impossibly distant, absorbed entirely in his phone and the world beyond the walls of their home. Charlotte had noticed the subtle shift over the past months, how his attention lingered on another woman, how small gestures of affection toward her had all but disappeared. At first, she had tried to rationalize it, convincing herself that it was just stress, work, or fatigue. But deep down, she had known the truth, a painful gnawing that refused to be ignored. Tonight, that truth struck with the weight of a sledgehammer. Victor had announced casually that he was taking Scarlett Monroe, the woman Charlotte had come to loathe silently, on a luxurious trip to Paris. The words hung in the air like a cruel joke, and Charlotte's heart constricted painfully. Paris, the city of romance, the city they had once dreamed of visiting together, was now a playground for Victor's betrayal. Not a single thought of her, of their unborn child, or of the emotional devastation he was leaving in his wake crossed his mind. He had packed for Scarlett with meticulous attention, reserved the finest accommodations, and left Charlotte to cope with the shattering realization of her isolation. Charlotte felt a wave of humiliation wash over her. She had imagined a husband who would protect her, cherish her, and share in the anticipation of their child's arrival, yet here she was, abandoned emotionally in the very home they shared. Tears blurred her vision as she sank into the couch, the fabric pressing against her swollen belly, reminding her of the new life that depended on her. Helplessness threatened to overtake her, but beneath the sorrow, a small spark of determination flickered. She was hurt, betrayed, and left alone, but Charlotte knew that this was not the end of her story. Even as heartbreak coursed through her veins, she resolved to survive, to endure, and to find a way to reclaim her dignity. The night felt impossibly long, filled with the echo of Victor's betrayal and the sharp pang of loneliness, yet within that darkness, Charlotte's mind quietly began to turn, planting the seeds of a plan that would ensure she was never powerless again. Charlotte Blake curled up on the edge of the bed, her hands resting protectively on her swollen belly. The soft hum of the city outside did little to soothe the storm inside her. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks, each drop a bitter reminder of the betrayal she had endured. The image of Victor Langford laughing with Scarlett Monroe in Paris haunted her mind, replaying relentlessly like a cruel film she could not pause or stop. The walls of their home, once a sanctuary, now felt suffocating, pressing in on her as if the very air reminded her of how alone she had become. Her sobs were quiet, almost hidden, but they carried the weight of accumulated grief. Charlotte felt powerless, stripped of the love, attention, and respect she deserved. Every expectation she had held for her marriage, the comfort of a shared life, the protection of her husband, the joy of welcoming their child together, had been shattered in an instant. The emotional toll was profound. She felt hollowed out, exhausted, and fearful of the months ahead. Yet, beneath the sorrow, a flicker of determination began to burn. Charlotte's mind, sharp and observant, noticed small details, small opportunities. She had always prided herself on her intelligence, on her ability to think clearly even in difficult circumstances, and now she realized that her survival, and her dignity, depended on more than endurance. Tears blurred her vision, but the gears in her mind were turning, plotting, considering the ways in which she could regain control, protect her child, and ensure that the betrayal would not define her life. As she wiped her cheeks and drew a shaky breath, Charlotte felt the first stirrings of empowerment. Her sorrow was real, but it was no longer the entirety of her identity. Behind the tears, a quiet, simmering resilience had begun to emerge, preparing her for the steps she would take to reclaim her strength, her dignity, and ultimately, her life. Charlotte Blake sat at the dining table, her laptop open, a notebook beside her, and a pen poised in her hand. The tears of the previous night had faded, replaced by a burning sense of purpose. She was determined that Victor Langford's betrayal would not define her, nor would it dictate the terms of her life or the future of her unborn child. Each moment spent dwelling on heartbreak had taught her one undeniable truth: she needed a plan. Survival was not enough, she wanted justice, dignity, and the satisfaction of reclaiming control over her life. She began by carefully assessing the situation. Victor's patterns, his arrogance, and his predictable obsession with appearances provided insight into his vulnerabilities. Charlotte made meticulous notes on his business routines, social habits, and interactions with Scarlett Monroe. She identified where he had overstepped boundaries, where evidence of his indiscretions might exist, and how she could leverage that information strategically. The process was methodical, almost clinical, but beneath it burned a passionate drive fueled by betrayal. She knew that subtlety and intelligence would serve her better than confrontation alone. Next, she turned her attention to her own strengths. Charlotte reviewed her social connections, the people who genuinely supported her, and the legal avenues available. She researched ways to protect herself financially and legally, considering everything from custody rights to property safeguards. Her planning was quiet, deliberate, and unseen, ensuring that Victor remained oblivious to the growing storm she was preparing. With each strategy she formulated, Charlotte felt her confidence rise. What had begun as sorrow and despair now transformed into clarity and focus. She visualized the steps ahead, imagining a scenario in which she stood tall, empowered, and unbroken, while Victor faced the consequences of his choices. The thrill of planning, the careful orchestration of her next moves, provided a sense of control she had not felt in months. By the time she closed her notebook for the night, Charlotte understood that the comeback was not just about punishing Victor, it was about reclaiming herself. The spark of determination that had flickered in her tear-streaked moments now blazed brightly. She was no longer just a victim of betrayal, she was a strategist, a protector of her child, and a woman ready to rise above humiliation with intelligence, courage, and relentless focus. Charlotte Blake knew that reclaiming her life would not be a solitary endeavor. She needed allies, people she could trust implicitly, who would support her emotionally and strategically. The first person she reached out to was her closest friend, Julia Hayes, a woman known for her sharp mind and unwavering loyalty. Julia arrived promptly, bringing not only comfort but also perspective. Together, they discussed Charlotte's options, weighing every potential move, every risk, and every opportunity. Julia listened intently, offering insights Charlotte hadn't considered, and helped her refine her plan into something practical, calculated, and powerful. Next, Charlotte contacted a trusted legal advisor, someone experienced in family and corporate law who could guide her through the complexities of protecting herself and her unborn child. The lawyer outlined precautionary measures, from restraining orders to safeguarding financial assets, explaining the steps clearly so Charlotte could make informed decisions. Every recommendation was like a piece of armor, shielding her from potential retaliation while strengthening her position. The reassurance of having professional expertise at her side amplified Charlotte's confidence, transforming her anxiety into strategic focus. Charlotte also reached out to her father, Peter Blake, whose influence and decisiveness had always inspired her. He promised his full support, offering not only protection but also connections that could prove invaluable if she needed to confront Victor publicly or legally. The network she was building combined emotional support, practical guidance, and strategic leverage, forming a web that made her stronger than she had felt in months. As Charlotte looked around at the people rallying to her side, hope began to replace the lingering shadows of despair. She was no longer isolated, no longer powerless. Unity, preparation, and shared determination infused her plan with momentum. Each ally contributed strength, insight, and encouragement, reinforcing the certainty that she could face Victor and the challenges ahead with intelligence, courage, and unshakable resolve. The foundation was laid, and Charlotte felt ready to move forward with precision and confidence. Charlotte Blake's heart raced as she prepared to execute the first phase of her plan. Months of careful observation, strategizing, and gathering allies had led to this moment, the opportunity to expose Victor Langford's betrayal in a way that could not be ignored. She had chosen a strategic approach, ensuring that every step would maximize impact while protecting her dignity and her unborn child. It was not revenge born of impulse, it was calculated, precise, and inevitable. The venue was a social gathering Victor could not avoid, a charity gala where his professional peers, media representatives, and social acquaintances would all be present. Charlotte arrived with calm poise, radiant in appearance yet armed with the invisible power of truth. Hidden within her purse was a carefully compiled dossier, photographs, messages, and confirmations of Victor's ongoing affair with Scarlett Monroe. Every piece of evidence was clear, undeniable, and damning. The tension built as she approached the room, each step measured, each breath steady despite the fluttering nerves in her chest. Victor, unaware of the storm approaching, mingled confidently with his colleagues, Scarlett at his side, her laughter bright and unthinking. Charlotte's entrance did not go unnoticed. Eyes turned, whispers spread, and the subtle undercurrent of curiosity began to swirl. With Julia Hayes and her legal advisor discreetly observing, Charlotte began distributing her evidence to trusted contacts, ensuring that the information would reach the right people at precisely the right moment. The strategy worked flawlessly. Victor's charm and authority began to falter under the weight of the mounting scrutiny. Scarlett, once confident and dismissive, began to sense the shift. Her expressions flickered between disbelief and panic as she realized that the world she had entered, luxury, power, and secrecy, was now a minefield of public exposure and professional consequence. Each subtle glance Charlotte cast, each discreet handover of information, amplified Scarlett's growing realization that her role in Victor's betrayal carried consequences she had not anticipated. The air thickened with anticipation. Victor's composure cracked in small, almost imperceptible ways, tightened jaw, tense posture, fleeting glances of unease. Charlotte watched silently, her resolve strengthening with every passing second. The humiliation and exposure were not just personal, they rippled outward, touching his reputation, his social standing, and his carefully curated image. The suspense reached a crescendo as the first murmurs of acknowledgement and shock spread through the room. In that moment, Charlotte knew the plan was working, the power balance had shifted, and the first true signs of justice were unfolding before her eyes. Victor Langford and Scarlett Monroe had arrived in Paris, their laughter filling the luxurious suite that overlooked the Seine. They believed themselves untouchable, basking in the illusion that Victor's wealth and connections could shield them from consequence. Scarlett sipped champagne, her confidence absolute, while Victor recounted business successes and personal triumphs, oblivious to the storm that was quietly gathering thousands of miles away. Their arrogance made them blind to the subtle threads of Charlotte Blake's plan that were already in motion, a plan designed to follow them even across continents. Suddenly, Victor's phone buzzed repeatedly. The messages on the screen were innocuous at first, then increasingly pointed. Photographs, screenshots, and documentation of his affair were being disseminated through his professional network. Key investors, social peers, and mutual acquaintances had received direct proof of his betrayal, evidence Charlotte had ensured would reach them in a coordinated wave. Scarlett's confident smile faltered as she read the first messages, her fingers trembling slightly on the sleek leather of the phone. Shock rippled through the room. The man who had promised her luxury and excitement now looked pale, his composed exterior crumbling under the weight of imminent social and professional fallout. Victor's attempts to minimize the situation were frantic and ineffective. He called contacts, demanded explanations, and tried to assert control, but each effort only amplified the humiliation. Messages that were meant to remain private were now public whispers, spreading through Parisian social circles and business channels alike. Scarlett realized, too late, that she had been a pawn in a game far larger than herself, her influence and status dissolving before her eyes. The irony was sharp and almost poetic. Victor had taken the Mistress to the city of romance and grandeur to celebrate a secret, yet the very grandeur of Paris became the stage for his public embarrassment. Each notification, each glance at a shocked acquaintance or a message confirming exposure, reminded him that wealth and charm could not prevent accountability. Charlotte's reach had been far greater than he imagined. Suspense lingered in the suite, thick and almost tangible, as Victor and Scarlett came to understand the consequences of their arrogance. The power balance had shifted irrevocably, and Charlotte's unseen hand orchestrated the chaos with quiet, precise satisfaction. Charlotte Blake stood tall, her presence commanding attention without a word. The months of planning, strategizing, and enduring heartbreak had culminated in this moment, where her dignity was no longer a fragile concept but a visible, undeniable force. Invitations she had once hesitated to accept, events she had avoided out of shame, now became platforms to reclaim her identity and assert the strength she had cultivated in private. Each gesture, graceful, confident, and deliberate, communicated that she was no longer the powerless, betrayed wife Victor Langford had left behind. Her friends, allies, and family surrounded her, reinforcing the aura of support and strength. Julia Hayes, ever loyal and sharp-minded, whispered affirmations and quietly coordinated with Charlotte to ensure her social and professional standing remained intact. Peter Blake, her father, watched proudly, a steady presence that reminded Charlotte of the unwavering love and protection she had always deserved. Their acknowledgement, combined with her own inner resolve, magnified the sense of empowerment, creating a ripple effect through the circles she moved in. People began noticing not just her elegance but the confidence and intelligence she exuded. As word of Victor's public embarrassment and the exposure of his infidelity spread, Charlotte's reputation was reinforced rather than tarnished. Colleagues, acquaintances, and social peers now viewed her as resilient, strategic, and morally strong, a woman who had taken control of a situation designed to humiliate her and transformed it into a testament to her capability. Scarlett Monroe, once poised and confident, faded into the background, her influence evaporating as Charlotte's prominence rose. Charlotte felt a surge of vindication that went beyond mere revenge. This was not about punishing Victor, it was about reclaiming her power, asserting her agency, and demonstrating that betrayal could not define her life. Every confident step she took, every smile that met a supportive nod, reinforced her authority over her personal narrative. Triumph resonated in her heart, not from the downfall of others, but from the assertion of her own dignity. Charlotte had endured, adapted, and emerged stronger, proving that resilience, intelligence, and unwavering self-respect were far more powerful than wealth, deceit, or betrayal. Victor Langford could no longer hide behind his wealth or charm. The fallout from Charlotte Blake's carefully executed plan had been swift and unrelenting. Investors questioned his judgment, colleagues whispered about his indiscretions, and social circles that once fawned over his status now looked upon him with skepticism and thinly veiled disdain. Invitations dwindled, business opportunities stalled, and every attempt to assert control only reminded the world, and himself, of the damage his actions had caused. Reputation, meticulously built over years, was crumbling under the weight of truth and accountability. Scarlett Monroe, once confident in her allure and influence over Victor, began to understand the role she had played in this downfall. She had been a pawn, elevated only by Victor's ego and arrogance, and now the consequences were hers to bear. Her social standing diminished as whispers of her involvement circulated, leaving her isolated and discredited. The illusion of power she had clung to evaporated quickly, revealing the fragility of a position built on deceit and manipulation. Charlotte, meanwhile, watched from a distance, quietly satisfied. Her strategy had not relied on rage or impulsive retaliation but on intelligence, patience, and precision. Justice, in its poetic form, had arrived without her needing to compromise her dignity. Victor's embarrassment, professional setbacks, and social exile were not merely personal victories, they were evidence that truth, foresight, and resilience could prevail even against wealth and status. The resolution resonated deeply. Charlotte's life, her child's future, and her reclaimed autonomy were no longer threatened by betrayal or deception. She had ensured accountability without sacrificing her integrity. The consequences Victor and Scarlett faced were stark reminders that actions have repercussions, and that no amount of money, charm, or power could shield one from the consequences of moral failure. In this, Charlotte found both satisfaction and closure, confident that she had restored balance, dignity, and justice in a world that had momentarily seemed merciless. Charlotte Blake sat in the quiet of her sunlit nursery, her hands resting gently on her growing belly. The tumultuous months of betrayal, heartbreak, and careful strategizing had left their mark, but in this moment, a deep sense of peace settled over her. She could feel the subtle movements of her unborn child, a gentle reminder of the life she was nurturing and protecting. Each tiny kick brought a warmth that melted away lingering fears, replacing them with a profound connection and an unshakable sense of purpose. As she reflected on the whirlwind of events, Charlotte acknowledged the lessons she had learned. Self-respect had become her compass, guiding every decision she made and ensuring that no one, not even Victor Langford, could dictate her worth or her choices. Resilience had carried her through moments when despair threatened to overwhelm her, transforming heartbreak into motivation and vulnerability into strength. Independence, once a distant ideal, had become a tangible reality. She could rely on her intelligence, judgment, and inner fortitude to shape the life she desired for herself and her child. The emotional healing was gradual but steady. Nights once filled with tears and anxiety were now moments of quiet reflection and gentle planning for the future. Charlotte allowed herself to smile at small joys, the nursery painted with soft colors, the careful preparation of baby clothes, and the supportive messages from friends and family who had stood by her. These simple acts reinforced her sense of safety, love, and optimism for the future. In this stillness, Charlotte recognized that she had emerged stronger, wiser, and fully capable of navigating whatever challenges lay ahead. Her heart, once heavy with betrayal, now brimmed with hope. She knew that her journey had not only protected her child but had also forged her into a woman who understood her own worth, embraced her resilience, and cherished her independence. The future was bright, and Charlotte was ready to meet it with courage, love, and unwavering optimism. The day Charlotte Blake had long anticipated finally arrived. She stepped into the elegantly arranged hall, a symbol of confidence and poise, every movement deliberate and measured. This was not merely an appearance, it was a statement. The media, friends, colleagues, and family had been subtly invited, ensuring that her triumph would be witnessed without turning it into a spectacle of spite. Charlotte's presence alone radiated strength, a stark contrast to the shadow of betrayal that had once haunted her. Victor Langford and Scarlett Monroe had been informed of her event but remained unaware of its true purpose. They arrived expecting routine social recognition, only to be confronted by Charlotte's undeniable aura of empowerment. Whispers spread immediately. Her elegance, her calm command of the room, and the subtle acknowledgments of her allies painted a vivid picture of a woman who had endured, learned, and ultimately risen above adversity. Victor's posture stiffened, his confidence eroding as the reality of his failure became inescapable. Scarlett's bright composure faltered, replaced by the dawning realization that she had been nothing more than a pawn in Charlotte's meticulously orchestrated plan. Charlotte moved through the crowd with grace, exchanging greetings and sharing warm smiles with those who had supported her. Each interaction reinforced her reclaimed social power, and each glance at Victor reminded him of the price of his arrogance. She had not needed to shout, accuse, or dramatize. Her intelligence, preparation, and courage spoke volumes. In this public, symbolic moment, Charlotte demonstrated that she had emerged not only unbroken but elevated, a woman whose dignity and self-respect had been preserved and amplified. As the evening drew to a close, Charlotte reflected briefly on the journey she had endured. Betrayal had come, but it had not won. Resilience, strategy, and courage had triumphed. Victor and Scarlett were left to grapple with the consequences of their actions, while Charlotte moved forward, her head held high, her heart light, and her future wide open. This final victory was not just about personal vindication, it was a declaration that intelligence, preparation, and unwavering self-respect could overcome betrayal, and that true power always lay in resilience, dignity, and courage.